There comes a time in life when silence becomes the battleground and dignity becomes the sword. You didn't shout. You didn't fight fire with fire. You didn't expose them, though you had every reason to. You stayed grounded, not because you were weak, but because you understood something they never did. That destiny doesn't respond to noise. It answers purpose. While they laughed behind closed doors, while they gathered around tables to twist your name, you were in the secret place being refined by the hand of God. They thought they had the final word, but they didn't know God was still writing. They thought they buried you, but they didn't know you were a seed. And the more they pressed you down, the deeper your roots went. The more they rejected you, the more heaven rearranged the path to your throne. They dismissed you like you were disposable, mocked you as if your silence meant defeat. But the God you serve is not a spectator. He is a judge, and when he steps in, he doesn't just vindicate, he reverses. He doesn't just restore, he reveals. He exposes the unseen. He brings the proud to their knees and makes the hidden motives cry out in public shame. What they did in shadows, he replayed in front of everyone. Not because you prayed for revenge, but because you chose righteousness. You walked in integrity when it was inconvenient. You chose not to clap back when you had evidence. You turned down gossip when you could have burned their reputation to the ground. That's why heaven moved for you. That's why the tables turned without you lifting a finger. When God makes them crawl back in shame, it's not just a moment of justice. It's divine strategy. It's a warning to every observer that he still defends the pure in heart. It's a declaration to every spectator that no lie outlives the truth. It's a lesson to every manipulator that his silence is not permission and his patience is not forgetfulness. He was watching. He was listening. He saw every crooked intention dressed up as concern. And while they were building their stage to humiliate you, he was constructing the very platform they would fall from. Some of you are in that very season now. They think you're done. They think their influence has erased your worth. But I came to tell you, God is not finished. He is just beginning to turn their laughter into lament. That job they thought you were finished, but God wasn't. Tried to block you from, it's coming back around. That relationship they tried to poison, God is now defending it with clarity and peace. That ministry they said would collapse, it's becoming a refuge for many. That reputation they tried to destroy, God is restoring it in the sight of those who agreed with the lie. Don't chase vindication. Don't waste your energy proving your innocence. Let them speak. Let them assume. Let them dance in circles of delusion. Because when God moves, it's not a rebuttal, it's a revelation. He will make them eat their words. He will let their own stories testify against them, and he will lead them back to you. Not with pride, but with trembling, stuttering mouths and heads bowed low in shame. That's how God works. He doesn't just lift you, he humbles them, not for your ego, but for his name's sake. Because your life is his message. Your story is his glory, and your pain was the ink he used to sign a miracle in motion. So keep walking, keep praying, keep building, keep trusting. Because when it's time, not only will you rise, but they will have to watch. Watch in silence, watch in awe, and yes, crawl back in the very shame they once tried to wrap around you. They touched what God had anointed. They misjudged what heaven had ordained. They played with a child of destiny, forgetting that the last shall be first, and the stone they rejected has become the cornerstone. Now, watch what God does. Watch how he makes the crooked straight. Watch how he draws a line between truth and pretense. Watch how he places a crown on the very head they tried to shame. Because when God decides to step into your story, even your enemies become your foot tool. And the same mouths that mocked will have no choice but to say, surely God was with you. There is a kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't argue, doesn't compete for attention. And yet, it shakes the very foundations of evil. It is the power of restraint, the discipline of stillness, the unshaken calm of someone who knows that their battle is not in the hands of people, but in the hands of God. When they came with lies, you didn't flinch. When they whispered your name with filth on their tongues, you didn't stoop to their level. You chose the higher road, not Because you lacked a voice, but because you trusted that heaven heard it louder than any crowd ever could. Your silence was not your surrender, it was your submission to a greater courtroom, one not ruled by public opinion, but by divine order. They mistook your composure for weakness. They thought your lack of reaction was defeat. But what they never saw was that behind your quietness stood a kingdom. A kingdom that does not lose sight, does not sleep, does not ignore injustice. While they danced over what they thought was your downfall, the heavens were assembling your vindication, not through rage, not through vengeance, but through righteousness. The lion does not roar at flies. And you, chosen by God, knew better than to waste breath on battles beneath your destiny. You understood that some storms are not meant to be fought, they're meant to be outlasted. While others rushed to respond, you waited. You waited not out of fear, but because wisdom told you what is from God cannot be erased by the lies of men. And in that waiting, something powerful happened. You were not losing ground. You were being fortified. Every day you stayed quiet, your roots went deeper. Every moment you didn't retaliate, your character was being sharpened. And what they couldn't understand is that real strength is not proven in reaction. It is proven in patience. You didn't defend yourself because you knew God was not finished yet. And when God is still writing your story, you don't snatch the pen back. You wait, you trust, you stand still and let the author finish the masterpiece. People forget that silence is not always empty. Sometimes it's sacred. It's the place where God does his deepest work. They thought your lack of response was a void. They didn't know it was a vault. A place where God was storing every tear, every injustice, every betrayal, not to bury it, but to use it. Because nothing done against you in secret goes unseen by the God who sees all. He took your stillness and turned it into strategy. He turned your silence into a setup for a comeback so undeniable that the very people who plotted your end would have to witness your rise without a single word in their defense. Let them talk, let them twist, let them assume. What matters is that you didn't move out of bitterness. You moved with purpose. You stayed still long enough for God to step in and do what only he can do. Because when you refuse to dirty your hands in their game, God uses your clean heart to elevate you. The world will always provoke you to react, to explain, to retaliate. But wisdom whispers, be still. Stand firm. The trap they set was never yours to escape. It was theirs to fall into. And so you waited. You, favor is louder than falsehood, held your peace. You didn't scream your innocence. You lived it. You didn't chase rumors. You chased purpose. You didn't fight for a platform. You let God prepare one. And when the time was right, he didn't just prove you right. He exposed every wrong in front of those who celebrated your silence as defeat. That's not just victory. That's divine justice. That's what happens when you let silence speak and God roar. They thought they had silenced you. They believed that because the world stopped clapping for you, God had stopped working for you. But what they didn't realize was that your absence from their spotlight was not the end of your story. It was the beginning of God's preparation. While they laughed and gossiped and passed judgment from their platforms, you were hidden, not forgotten, not rejected, but reserved. You were not being punished. You were being processed, refined in quiet places where applause cannot reach and ego cannot survive. There are seasons where God pulls you away from the noise, not to isolate you, but to insulate you, to protect the fragile pieces of your purpose from the pollution of premature exposure. It's in those invisible chapters that heaven does the deepest healing. The refining doesn't happen when everyone is watching. It happens when you're alone, when you're broken, when your name is no longer on their lips. And yet, God is whispering your identity into your spirit. They saw a disappearance, but God was crafting a transformation. While they used your silence to decorate their lies, you were being taught how to walk with wisdom. How to breathe through betrayal, how to let your pain become oil. You were being prepared not for vindication alone, but for the weight of the blessing coming. That's why God couldn't let you skip the fire. Because the elevation he planned was never cosmetic, it was foundational. He wasn't just preparing a table in the presence of your enemies. He was building you into someone who could feast with grace and not arrogance. Someone who could be blessed without becoming bitter. The divine refining room is not pretty. It doesn't come with affirmation. It doesn't always come with clarity. But it is where destiny is formed. In the unseen. In the tears no one knows about. In the moments when it would have been easier to become like them. Bitter, petty, loud, reactive, but you chose to be still. You chose to keep your heart clean when the world gave you every reason to make it hard. You chose to trust a God who speaks in silence and moves behind closed doors. They were watching the surface, but God was working beneath it. They saw a fall, but heaven saw a seed being planted. And when God plants something, He doesn't explain it to spectators. He covers it, hides it. Because if He exposed it too soon, the same people who clapped for your downfall would come with their hands full of poison. So He shielded you, not to embarrass you, but to preserve what was sacred. Your silence was the soil, your surrender was the water, and your pain became the sunlight that pushed you to grow in ways applause never could. And now, while they're still recycling the same old lies, you're emerging stronger, wiser, refined, not because you fought to be seen, but because you were faithful when no one was looking. That's what makes your comeback so unshakable. It wasn't built on revenge. It was built in reverence. God does not refine what He does not plan to use. The fire was not a punishment. Is what? It was proof that you carry something too valuable to remain ordinary. So when they thought you were done, when they mistook the silence for surrender, God was still writing, still shaping, still anointing. And now the very ones who thought they buried you will witness the bloom. Not because you shouted your truth, but because you were patient enough to be transformed in the hidden places where only God saw. The truth doesn't beg to be seen. It waits, silent and certain, knowing that no lie has the power to bury it forever. They tried to smother your truth beneath layers of gossip, half-truths, and carefully crafted illusions. They twisted facts and rewrote stories, thinking that if enough people repeated the lie, it would become reality. But the truth has a pulse. It breathes even under pressure. It survives every accusation, every betrayal, every whisper that was meant to stain your name. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It simply waits for the appointed time when it will rise, undeniable, unstoppable, and radiant in its full glory. You didn't have to shout to make them believe you. You didn't need to defend yourself against every rumor. That's the brilliance of divine truth. It doesn't lose its strength in silence. While their voices got louder, your truth grew deeper. While they tried to control the narrative, your truth was being nourished in secret. God doesn't need an audience to preserve what is real. He protects it in hidden chambers, away from the reach of manipulators. The power of staying silent, away from the distortions of prideful hearts. They thought that because people clapped for their version, they had won. But popularity does not prove purity. Crowds can be wrong. Applause can be rented and reputations can be polished. Lies. But truth, though quiet, does not fade, it does not weaken. In fact, the longer it waits, the more powerful its return becomes. Like a seed buried in darkness, your truth was never dead. It was simply being nurtured for a season of undeniable manifestation. Let them mock. Let them build their case with false confidence. Let them collect supporters like trophies because the truth doesn't need numbers. It needs timing. And when God says it's time, no voice will be loud enough to drown it out. You will not have to explain. You will not have to prove. You will not have to beg for understanding. The same mouths that repeated the lie will be silenced by the weight of what is finally revealed. And it won't come with rage. It will come with undeniable clarity that even your enemies cannot refute. The beauty of truth is that it does not compete. It waits. It watches. And when the dust settles, it stands. Everything else falls. The schemes, the fake smiles, the performances, they all collapse. Because only what is rooted in truth can endure the test of time and fire. You endured. You waited. You stayed silent. Not because you didn't care, but because you knew that rushing to fix what God was preparing to reveal would only cheapen the outcome. And now that truth is rising. Not with noise, but with evidence. Not with drama, but with favor. You've outlasted the distortion. You've surpassed the slander. And soon your truth will speak in rooms you were once pushed out of. It will echo in hearts that once turned against you. It will shift the atmosphere without your voice even being raised. That's the power of God's truth. It doesn't just vindicate you. It educates those who doubted you. So walk boldly in your silence. Carry your truth with dignity. Let them say what they will. You're not racing them to the finish line. You're walking a path God paved with purpose. And when the truth comes, not if, but when, it won't just clear your name. It will crown your process. It will show that the truth never needed defending. It only needed divine timing to arrive. Heaven doesn't move because of noise. It responds to purity. The throne of God is not stirred by clamor, chaos, or cries for revenge. It is moved by hearts that remain clean when dirt was thrown at them. You didn't hold back because you lacked the power to fight. You held back because you trusted in a power higher than your own. And that power, the power of God, does not rush in to assist those who mirror the tactics of their enemies. It backs those who rise above them. You had every right to expose, to confront, to bring receipts and let the world see the truth, but you didn't. You could have destroyed their illusions with a few well-placed words, but you chose instead to guard your spirit, not because you were weak, but because you were wise. And wisdom is what moves the heavens. It is the restraint of the righteous that draws God's attention. It is the choice to remain unspotted, untainted, even when you were falsely accused that made the angels stand still in awe. You refused to let the bitterness of their betrayal rewrite the purity of your purpose. While others used their mouths to retaliate, you used your silence as a shield. And in that silence, heaven leaned in closer. You were bruised, but you didn't become bitter. You were wounded, but you didn't seek to wound in return. That alone placed a divine mark upon you. You became untouchable. That, not because you shouted, but because you stayed surrendered. And that surrender is what made the heavens fight for you. There's a level of favor that only falls on those who choose character over carnage. You could have clapped back and, yes, you might have won the argument, but you would have lost something greater. Your alignment with divine justice. Because God doesn't cosign revenge that comes from pride. He defends those who resist the temptation to become like their attackers. That's why your silence wasn't empty. It was powerful. It was filled with restraint, with patience, with reverence. And it triggered a war in the spirit realm that no human eye could see. They thought you were letting it go. They thought your silence was weakness. But while they celebrated their deception, God was taking notes. Every time you held your tongue, He recorded it. Every time you wept in secret, instead of retaliating in public, He took notice. And the ledger of heaven never misses a mark. You were not abandoned. You were being documented. And now every tear you shed, every insult you endured, every time you chose grace instead of gossip, it is being converted into divine movement. Heaven fights for the ones who carry pain without poisoning others. For the ones who know that elevation is not earned by vengeance, but by humility. For those who don't just quote scripture, but live it in the dark behind closed doors where no one claps and no one sees. That's where your victory was born. Not on a stage, but in a secret place where your integrity became your warfare. And because you didn't fight like them, you won in a way they never saw coming. God didn't just defend you. He distinguished you. He didn't just protect you. He promoted you. He honored you. Not because of what they said, but because of what you didn't say. You kept your spirit clean in a dirty fight. And that became your signature in heaven. That was the moment favor chased you. That was the moment justice turned its eyes toward you. Not because you fought louder, but because you stood taller. And now the same God who saw what you refused to say is about, when shame finds its way back to the source, to reveal what they could never hide. When God steps in, He doesn't simply bring justice, He brings alignment. He doesn't merely balance scales. He flips them in full view, making sure the proud who built their towers on lies now fin themselves crawling beneath the weight of their own deception. Divine justice is not mild. It's precise. It's holy. And when it arrives, it does not ask for permission. It silences noise. It corrects distortion. It brings clarity where confusion was manufactured. And it, by stepping on